welcome to the Whiteboard. Today we're going to take a second and discuss LinkedIn and the 500 million records that just showed up for sale on a Darknet Forum. Let me be clear on what I mean by Darknet Forum. Sometimes that is misunderstood or misconstrued by media or even sometimes purported experts. In this case, this is a forum that exists on Tor, the Onion router. And you have to go to a Tor address in most cases to get to this forum. In some cases, that umbrella of Darknet also includes ClearNet, things you could potentially go to in your browser if you typed in the name directly, but because of the activity they perform, selling stolen information, selling databases, selling initial access, selling malware, transacting in things that we would consider hacking or hacker-like tactics, talking about scams, things like that, the how-tos, tutorials, and ways to do it, and even buying resources to perform it, those things tend to fall under a Darknet umbrella. And typically when we use the word Darknet in cybersecurity, we tend to, there's a lot of tend tos here, but we're trying to say that is a criminal element that is involved in it, regardless of whether it's on Tor or it's in ClearNet or somewhere else, I2P, ZeroNet, and so on. It does not matter location so much as we consider that a criminal nexus, a location where criminals gather. It does not mean that they're the sole residents, but that's just what that is meant to imply. So for LinkedIn to have 500 million records show up on that site, and that kind of site, whether it was that one or another one, is an indicator that there could have been a breach, which is why media is labeling this the LinkedIn breach. Now, personally, upon examination and looking at other people's analysis, my conclusion is it is not necessarily a breach, where a breach would be defined as they lost inside or private information of LinkedIn. In this case, LinkedIn lost inside information. It came from inside their systems in a way that's not publicly visible. I don't think that occurred at all. Based on the information that's there, the samples and what you can pull down for a few dollars, that information is almost completely things that you can gather publicly if you scraped LinkedIn profiles. Now that does not mean it's not dangerous. It does not mean that criminals cannot use that to do bad things. What it does mean is it's unlikely to be an inside breach. And so it's less a breach and more of a collection of publicly scraped information that was put together and is now being sold in this place that is effectively a watering hole for criminals. That by itself makes it a little more dangerous than if a ClearNet site had collected it, if a marketing firm had collected it. Everybody I named there collects information this way, this same kind of data. The thing that makes it dangerous is adding it into this kind of watering hole site puts it into what we call the Darknet Corpus, the body of information about people and companies that exists in the criminal sphere. It makes it more readily accessible. And the fact that it's being sold for a very low price, from $2 to $4 up to potentially $1,000 if you want the whole thing with some kind of private information that the person who's selling it says they have, that could be more dangerous. But the majority of it is information that you, as a person who has a profile in LinkedIn, has chosen to make visible. Information about whatever you put on LinkedIn. Most of us use LinkedIn as a second resume and as a way to social network and connect with groups. Now, inside of this data set is definitely your name, your phone number, and other elements like this that are connected to your LinkedIn account, including who you're connected to. And it's these three things especially that I want to talk about, because there's a few things you need to know about this kind of information. This kind of low-level general information, when it enters into the Darknet Corpus or the criminal sphere, it only has a couple of uses. Its biggest use is to network and create social engineering connections for criminals so they can scam, attack, or phish you better. Primary three things that are going to happen as a byproduct of this, because of the networking they can do with the information that's there. By knowing your name and your phone number, that gives them ways to send you either email or phishing or smishing, They can send you SMS phish. They can send you an email phish because your email that you used with LinkedIn is included. By having who you're networked with, kind of like the Facebook one that happened very recently as well from public information, this tells me who you're connected to. By understanding who you're connected to, I can figure out social structure. You're more likely to respond to a phish or a smish from someone you know than you are to someone you don't. Especially if I can spoof or fake the phone number of the person that you expect to get something from. Or I can fake the email from someone that you expect to get something from. It makes social engineering easier. It makes it easier to scam you, easier to phish you. It also opens up the door to perform an attack more readily. This information can become relatively dangerous based on that. Now, luckily, the majority population of criminals won't necessarily go to that extent. Over half of the population on the criminal side, if the information isn't immediately functional for them, they won't mess with it, they won't buy it, because it takes additional work, and they're already, like everyone else, stressed to the maximum on what they want to do. It's the other 50% that becomes problematic. A good 30% of them will actually fuse this information with other things, and like our network diagram, create connections all over the place on how your data will fit. And that will cause them to have a greater advantage and greater success at doing one of these three things or other items, up to including guessing passwords and things like that. The other 20%, if you're following my percentages, they are analysts by trade that work on the criminal sphere, and they will take this and they will not only fuse it together with other sources of information, they will expand on it and be able to extrapolate even more data from what's here. They are the truly dangerous part of this whole equation. But by itself, this information is not sufficient, and I'll say it again, is not sufficient to just attack you. So you do not need to run out and change all your passwords. You do not need to reset all your banks. You don't need to change accounts. You don't have to worry about account takeovers from just this. However, if you've exposed a lot of information, you might want to take prudent steps to make sure that you have everything secured. What are prudent steps? Turn on a second factor for authorization. Does not matter what it is. Preferably it's not connected to your phone number, since you know that that's potentially at risk. It can be a separate email account. It can be a spouse or family member's phone number. You can change a phone number. You can even have it be a soft or hard token, but something else where possible should be in here as a second factor, so that any accounts that you might worry about are more secured. Majority of accounts, almost all banks, and even places like LinkedIn and other things, they allow for a second, if not multiple factor, to keep you secure. You should have those on. You might want to take a second to re-examine your passwords. General advice, I know, but still important. If you don't use a password manager by this point in your life, you should. We have so many sites that we go to and take advantage of for what we do in life that the chances of you crossing passwords, if you're trying to keep it on your head, is very high. By using a password manager, you can set very nice levels of not only complexity, but use information that's not connected to things that people might know about you, which makes your passwords by default more secure. By trying not to memorize them, but only memorize the one it takes to open up that particular password vault, it makes life much easier for you, and you end up more secure overall. So back to topic. 500 records are for sale. Impact to you is very minimal. Impact to even most companies, again, very minimal, but it's the danger of this information being fused together to create ways and avenues for someone to scam, attack, or phish you. That becomes a problem. And the best way to fix that is, one, follow the link that I have below and see if your information is in there. Two, examine what you publicly made available and see if any of that is telling or dangerous to you. You may have exposed more information than you should. It should be a prudent measure on your part to examine that information and make sure it isn't putting you at risk. And three, my earlier advice about, one, making sure you have a second or more factor on, please make sure that's turned on for everything that's valuable to you. And lastly, consider the passwords you do use and make sure that they are strong. What is strong lookup password complexity? It's very simple, but a series of letters, numbers, and special characters together. Preferably more than, say, 6. Definitely more than 10 would be preferred. Any number is fine, especially one that you have not used before, which is where the password manager comes in. It allows you to source new passwords from things that you don't necessarily supply, which depersonalizes it from you and makes it harder for someone to take your private information that you may have exposed inadvertently and use it to figure out your passwords. So again, LinkedIn, 500 million records for sale. Kind of interesting, can be slightly dangerous, but not going to end the world. Something that stands out as a blip, frankly, in the long list of breaches that seem to happen, but is unlikely to actually be a true breach and more a compilation of records that were scraped from public sources. However, it's still possible that it's an inside piece, but unlikely. So this is a small bit on the LinkedIn breach. Thank you for your time. If you like this, please give it a like. If you like this and other information you see on our channel, please subscribe as we come out with more and more discussions, presentations, how-tos, and so on. Thank you for your time.